The Marvel Way panel. I guess I'm going to start by asking, in general, we'd like to find out how many people in the crowd are looking to break into comics as a writer. Okay, great. And then how about artists?
Yeah.
Okay. And then how about like an editorial capacity? Okay, great. All right, cool. That helps us kind of gear the conversation in certain ways. Next, I'm going to have the people on the panel introduce themselves. This is the Breaking into Comics the Marvel Way panel. I guess I'm going to start by asking, in general, we'd like to find out how many people in the crowd are looking to break into comics as a writer. Okay, great. And then how about artists?
Yeah.
Okay. And then how about like an editorial capacity? Okay, great. All right, cool. That helps us kind of gear the conversation in certain ways. Next, I'm going to have the people on the panel introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves. Starting with you.
Hi, I'm Robert Rodriguez. I do Spider-Gwen, and I've been working in comics for about, I just realized today, like, this is my 15-year working in comics.
Nice, nice.
I'm Mark Brooks, and I'm the cover artist on Ant-Man and Kanan the Last Padawan. I've been at Marvel now for, what, 10 years, I guess?
10?
Yeah.
I'm Chris Anka. I am drawing Captain Marvel. And I've been at Marvel for 5 years now.
And I'm CB Sobolski. I've worked at Marvel for 16 years now.
Hey, all right.
And I'm here to answer the editorial, talent, all those kinds of questions for everybody who has them, since I can't draw.
And one of the other things I think we like to do on the panel is just ask everybody going down the row what your secret origin was for breaking into comics. What did you do to get into comics the first time?
You guys want to go first? I'll go. A little bit of nepotism. That helps.
Okay.
It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, you know, because I broke in early 2000s where I met like, you know, Rick Remender and like Hickman and Jason Aaron and whatnot. So, you know, it is a case of who you know, but it's like, but these were like days when like, you know, we're all like getting a six-pack and drinking in the parking lot because that's all we could afford at the time.
Still do that.
Yeah. So that definitely helps. It also helps too, what got the attention is, probably what me and Jason can do on the book is, we did a bootlegs Wolverine book a long time ago. I'm not suggesting you guys should do this, but we did it. It got some attention to Marvel, so, you know, it's kind of a way like, you know, that kind of helped like show my our chops to the hires up because I'm pretty sure that went up the chain quite a bit when we did that. You know, and after that, you know, Jason got into comics, and he just kind of plucked me back from obscurity into going to the mainstream after that.
Cool.
I broke in right around the beginning of the 2000s, around 2003, and I really did the stepladder thing. So I broke in by doing some very, very minor regional comic work for free, basically, just so I could get some work published. And I'd show that work off at a comic convention and take another little step up to maybe another regional, smaller publisher. Eventually, I showed my work to Pat Lee at Dreamwave back when Transformers was really big. So I got some work doing some work with them and Devil's Due doing G.I. Joe. And then when I left there, I joined Eric Coe and Udon doing some Capcom work and working on Deadpool, which was, you know, some smaller work. And they showed my work to Bill Jamis, who was the editor, the publisher of Marvel at the time. And then I started doing work at Marvel. So it was probably a 4-year gradual process for me to actually get into Marvel.
Right.
Well, actually lucks out because apparently it was because of Mark Brooks that I got hired. So I actually honestly don't know how I got hired. So.
I believe I was the one that sent CB a link to his blog post, if I recall correctly.
I think so. And then
Yeah.
Nick Lowe was a huge proponent of
Yeah.
this stuff. And you started on covers before you did interiors, right?
Yeah, I was working at Sideshow Collectibles as a designer, and then one day I got an email from Nick Lowe. basically ready to hire me for whatever I was willing to do, but I still had a year of college left, so I told Nick no. And then his consolation prize to me was to start on covers on New Mutants. And so I was doing that as well as finishing my last year in college. And then I moved into animation working on Ninja Turtles. And I was there for a year basically juggling a storyboard design job for Nickelodeon from 9 to 5. And then I was drawing books for Nick from 5 to 4 in the morning for about a year straight until I couldn't do 2 jobs anymore, so I went full-time Marvel.
Yeah, later, if it comes up, you're kind of the perfect person to answer that question of when do you know it's okay to quit your day job? Like, that's
Right.
one of the biggest questions we always get is like, if you're a freelancer, how do you know when you have your day job, when's the right time to quit? And it's a different answer for everybody, but maybe later we can speak to that too. But for me, I wanted to be a writer. I was adamant on I was going to break into comics as a writer. So I would sit down every day, and it was before computers even had typewriter, and I would type out these like stories and proposals, and I pitched like Grendel and the Strike Force, and all these books to Jim Lee and Mark Silvestri, and I've still got a stack of rejection letters, like thanks but no thanks.
Right.
And then I figured, all right, well, if I'm not going to be a writer, I'm going to work in comics somehow. So I tried to break in on the editorial side. And I came in through manga, actually. I was living and working in Japan and got to know a lot of Japanese artists and came back here and was working for a manga company doing translations. And then I was, the way it's just, I wanted to get more American comic readers into manga before manga was like huge, So I started hiring a lot of American artists who were influenced by manga to do covers for me. Ed McGuinness, Kieran Grant, Joe Madureira, a lot of people like that. So I became like, oh, the guy who knows Marvel, American comics and manga. And then when Pokemon blew up, Marvel was looking for a guy who knew comics and manga. So I came into Marvel on the editorial side back in the day. And then I went on to eventually write comics and realized that I can't do it because I hate typing. So came back and worked at Marvel mostly as the talent scout for the last 10 years.
Cool. And I started in college, I wanted to work in comics, so I got a journalism degree, an English degree, and I got an internship at Wizard Magazine, which was around back then. For 2 summers, I drove from Texas to New York for an internship each summer. Then got on staff there, did some editorial stuff. Then I moved to DC Comics in the marketing department, and then the editorial department, and then now at Marvel, working with the talent. So there's not any one way, I think, is the focus here. There's not one way to get into comics. Everyone.
I always use the quote that Devin Grayson always had, is like breaking into comics is like breaking out of prison. Once someone finds one way to do it, that way is closed, and everyone has to come in a different way.
Exactly, yeah. And you can know editors, or you can know fellow artists or writers, but I think one of the important things is that you just have to do it. Like, you have to make comics in order to break into comics, which seems like a catch-22, but it's true.
It is true. Well, I mean, in this day and age, thanks to the internet, like when I was coming in, the internet was still in its infancy when I was trying to break in, so there really weren't like, online comic strips and things like that.
Right.
I mean, nowadays you could publish yourself for almost free. I mean, basically the price of a domain and designing a page on, on one of these, easy to design page setups, and you've got a comic, and you can get an audience that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Even Tumblr, right? 'Cause that's
Yep.
what you had, you do Tumblr.
I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it beats those Angel Fire sites I had to deal with.
Right. GeoCities,
But it's important to have your stuff out there. Like, Chris, you had your art up on a site. Was it your own site, or was it a Tumblr site, or?
I think it was your Tumblr that I was looking at.
Was it my DeviantArt? Thank God.
No, it wasn't your DeviantArt.
It was a multitude of things. I was kind of like, I mean, I would say I'm of like that first young generation who grew up on the internet. Like, I had a computer when I was 11, and so I was on the internet from day one. So I was very much just in that kind of growing community, where every kind of like when forums were big, and DeviantArt was big and all that. So I was there for all of that. So, and I just had been doing Marvel fan art since I was a kid. So I just had, a multitude of Marvel drawings already. And then since I went to college for animation, I had a bunch of animated films that I had done. So I think, you could extrapolate between I can draw Marvel characters and I can tell a story, I guess comics somewhere in there.
Right, right.
Yeah, I really wouldn't limit yourself either as a writer or as an artist, you know? If just because you have a Tumblr doesn't mean you shouldn't have your own website, you shouldn't have a Facebook page, you shouldn't have an Instagram. You know, we've hired people, you never know where you're going to cross someone. There's no such thing as overexposure when you're trying to break in. You know, someone's always going to find somewhere to see it. You know, editors and other artists and writers are always actively looking for people they want to work with. So wherever you can get your stuff out there, there's no boundaries stopping you to do that.
I think the other lesson too is that you have to be really big about participation online. So you can push your stuff online. I think that's great, and you will get attention that way. You'll get that much more attention if you're out there also commenting on other artists and sharing other artists' work, because it is a community. And you'll find that by giving that attention to other artists as well, it'll come back tenfold on yourself. So.
Yeah, I think it's important to differentiate if you have a Tumblr or a DeviantArt page or a Facebook page or whatever, differentiate what is your art versus what stuff that you're sharing so that it's easy to find your stuff. Use Twitter and all those things certainly, but make sure that it's easy to find your stuff too. Just put it everywhere you can. We were going to do a question and answer session. We can jump right to that if that's okay with you guys. There are microphones. There's one right here. If you guys want to start lining up for that. In the meantime, with you guys, what was your first experience with an editor like when you had to finally start working with someone who was a boss in charge of your creative stuff? Like what was the situation like? What lessons did you learn from that, I guess?
I guess kind of like it's like I was so used to just working my own because I did my own self-publishing for like years and
Right.
years, and like my first editor was dealing with Mark Doyle, like when we were doing FAP at Vertigo, and I was so used to I was like, oh yeah, I'll just do my own thing, that's fine. I'll turn it in, I'll get a paycheck and whatnot, and like getting notes was kind of weird.
Yeah.
But because on the front, I know it only made the work stronger because I didn't have that outside eye on the book. But so it was like being in a relationship for the first time in
Yeah.
a long time. It's kind of like you can have someone like constantly like critiquing you about your bad habits and hopefully to improve
Right.
yourself.
Yeah,
So it's kind of dealing with that.
right.
I don't know. I've loved it. I mean, I have taken gigs solely because of the editor
Sure.
over whatever the project actually is, because I like working with them. Just knowing myself, I know I work better if I'm trying to do a good job for somebody
Sure.
rather than just do it, because I'm never going to get it done. So I don't know, having an editor has been great for me, especially Nick Lowe, because then everything's just fun and it's really hard to say no to him
Right.
about anything.
He's handsome.
Yeah, he just sends photos of himself. I'm like, all right, yeah, sure.
My first experience was Trial by Fire. Marvel wanted to launch a new line of comics called Marvel Age, back in the mid-2000s, and I had to do an issue of Spider-Man in 3 weeks. I had to do it and I don't think I'd ever done maybe 5 or 6 pages in 3 weeks. So I had to do 22 pages in 3 weeks, which was backbreaking. But luckily, my editor was Jenny Lee at the time, who's not in comics anymore. I think she's editing films now, but she was such an understanding, cool editor. So it was, I don't know, it was almost kind of a mothering kind of experience. Like,
Yeah.
you're gonna be okay. I know you haven't slept in 5 days. You're gonna be fine. You know, just get the pages done.
Right.
So.
You know, I went from being an editor to being a freelancer, and that was an odd transition, but I always approached the editor as an editor. As an editor, you shouldn't be working against your creators. Editors get a bad rap sometimes, like, oh, they're just my boss, and they're here to make arbitrary changes, but it's not. Your editor's not your enemy. Your editor can be your best friend, and they're there to really make your work better. And the more accepting I was of the editor's input, and one of the first people I worked with as a freelancer was Nick Lowe as well. And Nick's a great editor because he's so supportive, and he doesn't just ask for changes or tell you things. You know, he explains it, he talks you through it, and those are the best editors who not just say, do this, do this, do this. They tell you why they think it's going to be better, and they're open to dialogue. They're open to communication, and I think those are some of the best editors out there.
Right, right. All right, you want to go first? Right?
Hi, thank you for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. I guess my question is, so I know that for artists, like you can put your stuff up on Tumblr and make yourself seen a little bit easier, I think, than writers for comic book scripts. So I guess my question is sort of, what do you think is like a good way to get yourself noticed sort of on the writing end through social media and online? Like, how do you put that up there and get it seen?
Sure. I think the answer really is to write comics that get drawn and put that out there. Editorial, for the most part, doesn't have a lot of free time to read scripts. So the best way to show them that you're able to guide an artist and write dialogue is to do it. And then they can tell from the published comic or the finished comic what you are like as a writer. And write books or write screenplays or write whatever, get movies made or whatever with your friends. But having that finished product shows them that you can stick to a deadline, get a product finished, and what your writing skills are like.
Yeah, and I say 95% of an editor's day is working with the creators and getting out the projects they already have in production. So they've only got a small window to find kind of new talent. So having something printed in publication in comic book format is the easiest way for them to read it. And, you know, not to be crass, but a lot of times reading is done in the bathroom. Right. So, you know, having a mini comic or having something there, you know, on an editor's desk when they're saying, oh, I'm going to grab this and go to the men's room, right. Or, you know, I got a couple minutes to go out into the park and take a break. They have a stack of books that they read on their desk. They're going to take that and they're going to take it out and read it. And as a writer, you know, that's the way to do it, because instead of reading a screenplay, having an actual comic shows them how you handle the narration, how you handle word balloons, how you handle dialogue. You know, the editor's going to be knowing that you've kind of directed the artist on some of the beats and things as well. So yeah, I can't, you know, overemphasize the importance of having that printed comic. And a lot of people say, well, is it okay if I put it online? And that's great too, you know, but it's also, you know, printing something out and sending it in. So as you took that initiative, you had something printed out, you looked up the address, you wrote a letter, and you sent it in to a specific editor. And I think that's also important too for a writer is, you know, when you're sending your work around, or when you're, you know, you're contacting an editor, be specific. Don't just do, you know, one of those crazy "Dear Editor" letters. I'm a writer, and here's what I want. You know, you should look for editors who edit comic books that are in your vein, in your genre. So if you think, you know, you like, you know, horror or darker books, look for the editor at Marvel whose taste you think might fit that. Someone like Jake Thomas, who does Punisher and does League of Monsters. You know, if you're a more lighthearted comedy writer and your work tends to go in that vein, maybe talk to Nick Lowe, who puts out like Nova and Spider-Man, and books that have kind of that more, you know, humorous bent to them. So know who you're pitching to, or know who you're sending your work to, and tailor the letter and tailor your kind of submission package to that person as a writer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hey, what's up?
Hey, what's up?
Nothing.
Responding.
Nothing.
Sorry. Okay.
Nothing's going
well,
on.
first off, hi. Thank you guys. That's wonderful. Not trying to advertise myself, but I'm a stunt artist and performer. But also, I do a lot of like concept and writings and such. When I was previously looking into internships towards Marvel, I was reading that they really like to submit blog posts. I'm just kind of curious on that, and I guess how does blog posts help aside from kind of writing a comic? Because I mean, when I write a blog, it's kind of more like a story, but it's like about my life rather than like a story of a comic.
I would think that's okay, because I know that there have been some Marvel writers that have been hired off of being writers for like Comic Alliance or you know, writers for a comic site or something, by doing blogs.
Mary Choi was hired off of her blog posts on the wall.
There you go. Yeah, Mary Cho, she does writing for like fashion and lifestyle stuff, but she got hired because she's into comics and she's a good writer. So, I mean, I'm not saying that they would be curious how your dialogue is, obviously, but I would think you could, you know, if you're a good enough writer and your blog's well enough followed, I would think you could easily get hired as a writer that way. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
Stories about yourself, or stories about your life or your family or your cat, are still stories, you know, and it's just how you turn the phrase or how you put the words together to keep someone engaged or make people laugh or make them cry or make them feel emotional. So if you can do that in a blog without pictures, a lot of times that speaks a lot to an editor, like, wow, if this person can turn what they do into a script, they'd be an awesome writer. And that we've seen it happen numerous times. So, you know, really, you know, hone your craft and your style on the blog, and that's what we definitely read that stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
guys.
Hey.
Hey, thanks for this panel and everything. My question is kind of on,
But.
my question is kind of on branching out to different mediums. I started mostly doing my own comics, but I moved on to like books and now video games and movie scripts. Am I wasting my time with that other stuff? Do you think I should stick to comics, or
No.
No.
No, not at all.
I don't think anything's a waste of time.
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said for knowing where your strengths lie. Like, it's the whole jack of all trades, but master of none. I would look at what you do and figure out where your strengths lie and probably focus more on that one or two things. But beyond that, if it's making you happy, do it all. Who cares?
That only helps your arsenal, like whatever creative endeavors that you do eventually. Like, it's only going to help you regardless.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's so many writers that, move from comics into other medium and vice versa. There's so many writers who are very successful and want to come into comics because they just like the medium. Stephen King, even,
Yeah.
one of the most successful writers in the world. He just loves comics, and he wanted to write comics. And you got guys like Bendis or Ed Brubaker, who at the top of their careers in comics and go on to write for TV and for film. So it's just like this guy said, it's all a matter of what you want to do. But comics is such a pure medium. The only limitation in comics is your imagination for a writer and for an artist. Even with video games and with film, even with special effects, there are limitations. Comics is the one place where you can do anything you could possibly want. If you can imagine it and you can get the point across to your artist, they can draw it. There's no limitations. I think that's kind of the freedom that comics offer.
Yeah, there's no budget to it, like a film or a video game would have.
Budget.
Yeah, endless budget.
Endless budget, yeah.
But there are lots of video game companies that hire comic writers actually because they're good storytellers, and there are lots of guys who work on video game backgrounds who are also cover artists, or like Chris was working on the Ninja Turtle cartoon. Like that stuff is just builds your career in general. So
Same for major, live action motion pictures, because most of them will storyboard the movies, and comic book artists were tailor made for storyboards.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. Hello.
Let's say that you're creating a comic book and you either have it online or you have it printed out and you send it in. If it's already copyright creator, not creator owned, but copyrighted by the actual company itself, what are your feelings about that when you sit down and you see a character that your company owns? Is there some sort of proprietary feeling?
Yeah, I thought about this when you answered the question a minute ago. I think what he's saying is like producing your own Spider-Man comic. That publishing that, I would assume that's a.
Yeah, what we like to look at is, for writers and for artists, when you're doing submissions, especially for writers, is kind of your own work, your creator-owned stuff. We want to see how you perform on your own characters or other people's characters before we let you tackle ours. And it's as an artist, it's okay to kind of we look at submissions because we always say we want to see people draw Spider-Man. We want to see how they handle the X-Men. We want to see how they handle Fantastic Four. But as a writer, definitely we don't encourage people to write Marvel scripts or sample scripts because legally we cannot look at those. There's a format that we have to follow for writers when they're going to submit to us, that there's paperwork that has to be signed first before you start submitting with our characters.
Right.
So the best route is really to go your own way.
Yes.
Submit that and see.
Yeah, it's kind of go your own way, and then when we see your work and we think we like what we see, then we'll contact you as to pitch to Marvel with our
appreciate
characters.
that.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks, man. Hello.
How's it going?
Good.
Quick question as a writer. How long is a comic book script for an issue, and is there a particular scripting format that gets used?
I think typically like 20 pages. If you guys
Yeah.
have, 20 pages, typical script. And I've seen mostly like a lot of writers have different ways of attacking stuff. Like with the, say for instance, with like Spider-Gwen, like Jason is pretty loose with his scripting. Like there are times when it's just, Gwen does this, and then Gwen does that. It's not even, that's all literally just says Gwen just hits here, she hits this, or hits there. And it's no more than that, literally. And just with dialogue bubble, I know there are other people who like, who are far more descriptive about panel description, like where the camera should be at, what the placement, and basically like just like almost like a movie, like like blocking the shot for the artist type thing. They're much more specific about that. So I don't think there is like a, I don't know, CB, you might know, there's not a huge like scripting format.
No, we always say in generalities that there's two styles. There's the screenplay style, and then there's what's quote-unquote Marvel style that Stan Lee developed, because Stan was writing multiple books for artists who were in the bullpen, so he would just, literally write paragraphs, here's Spider-Man is going, in this issue, he's going to wake up, eat his wheat cakes, kiss Aunt May goodbye, go to the Bugle, work on this, meet the Vulture, fight the Vulture, and at the end he's gonna go home and go on a date with Mary Jane, and that's gonna go bad. And then, the artist he was working with, would take those scripts and just turn it into a back then 24-page, 48-page story, and then Stan would go in and dialogue it after the fact, once the artist had drawn it. And there's still people that work like that. There's very few. Dan Slott, Tom DeFalco, Jason does it sometimes with Spider-Gwen. So that's considered Marvel style, but the more common style these days is considered screenplay style, what I was just talking about. Page 1, panel 1, exterior shot, Manhattan at night. Page 1, panel 2, close-up, Empire State Building. Page 1, panel 3, Spider-Man sits atop, perched like a gargoyle on the corner of the building. And then they give the writers specific directions. So those are kind of the two styles that work. And it just depends on the writer or the artist. Sometimes there's a shorthand that develops for teams that have been together for so long. So they've gone from screenplay style to kind of freeform style. Like, Bendis writes for a lot of his guys very loosely now once he comes to trust them and know their storytelling skills and can play to their strengths. But the thing that I always like to tell writers is you should always look at your scripts as a letter. You should be writing the letter to your editor, to your writer, and to the fans. That's, I think, is important. There is some formatting stuff, but in the end, you are writing, you're trying to explain yourself, get your feelings out there, put yourself on that paper, so your script should always be a letter to the people that you're going to be working with and the people who are going to be reading them.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, man. Hey.
Good afternoon.
Hey.
Just a little bit of background before I launch into my question. I've dabbled in writing for the past decade, both my own original work and some, as we might call it, fan fictional pieces with your characters in DC and anybody else, just for creative input. I'm now a communications major, minoring in history, working on my degree, and I've had my eye on the editorial internship at Marvel for a couple of years now. However, what I'd like to know really is, what is it that, as talent scouts, you guys look for when you're looking for someone to, join in editorial? Obviously, you've been very vocal so far on what you look for in a writer or an artist, but when you look at a member of the editorial staff, what are the kind of qualities that you look for? What are the kind of things that you're hoping we are doing before you really would consider us as a serious candidate for an internship or a job opportunity?
Well, that's a good question, actually.
Sure, yeah.
I think the only thing that binds any of the people that work at Marvel editorially, there's one thing, and it's a love of comics.
Yeah.
It's a love of telling good stories. And everyone comes from different backgrounds. We just hired a new bunch of very talented young editors, many who had just graduated college, and they came in and they all had something on their resume, either in creative writing, or they had experience maybe for a couple months, or in the job market in something like theater, or in film, or in book editing, something that made us think that they could take their life experiences and translate them into good kind of editors. I forget the word, but they could take their skills and apply them to what we do at Marvel. We always say that Marvel is the world outside your window. And that's, what Stan had put, and we want people who are going to bring their life experiences and bring their knowledge and put it into the comics and bring some of their world into what we do.
Right. Yeah, like Chris Robinson just joined up, and he had experience just interning at other companies. Lana Smith is with us, and she went to school for film.
And Heather Antos is the assistant editor on the Star Wars books now, and she ran a couple successful Kickstarters for comic book anthologies.
Yep.
And it's just that kind of stuff. People who are go-getters and kind of self-motivated and have shown to us that they really want to be in this business as much as people who are hiring them. They might not have skills as writers, they might have skills as artists, but they have a desire to really work in comics and play with the characters and tell good stories.
You know, with editors, for me, I mean, speaking from the art point of view, because I have to deal with them, you know, 2 or 3 times a week, there's an enthusiasm that an editor has that without that, I know my job will be harder because I'm working 12 hours a day in some cases. I'm working weekends. So when I get up on that Monday morning and I'm exhausted and I have a conversation, Heather's my editor right now, she's such a cheerleader of comics and of the job and of what she's doing and what I'm doing that she motivates me. So having that enthusiasm helps immensely, especially if you can communicate it to other people. It can become infectious.
Yeah, infectious, and articulation is very important. You have to be able to get your point across. There's so many people who, you know when something looks good or you know when something looks bad, and you have to be able to get it out there and express yourself clearly and make sure the editor or the writer or the artist understands your point.
Right. Organization is really important because when you first join as an assistant editor, really you're making sure that the trains are running on time and giving your feedback too. You learn as you go to become a stronger story editor, and sometimes an editor is a stronger art editor, so it just depends. And being friendly, I think too, you have to be able to speak to people. So.
As an editor, you guys know this as artists too, the books that you're working on, you really become a family. The editor, the writer, the artist, I mean, the interior artist, the cover artist, the penciler, the inker, you talk to those people almost every day. It's like, you know, spend as much time with them as you would with your wife or your girlfriend or your dog. You know,
right.
You're constantly working, and you have to have a personality that's going to fit and is going to really, you're going to get along with everybody, and you're going to drive each other.
Right.
And also keep in mind, as an editor, in most cases, you're going to have 4 or 5 families running at one time, and you've got to be able to multitask between all those people. I don't know how most editors do that. Pulling my hair out.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, man.
I have a 2-part question. First off, I'm a writer and an illustrator. I used to work for newspapers back before they fired everybody, pretty much.
Those guys.
Yeah, those guys. My illustration to me doesn't feel as strong as my writing, and I don't really want to be an illustrator. You talked about that you have to show that you can write, but also that you can do a script. Should I put it in script form? Should I try to draw it? If I draw it, I'm never satisfied with my own drawings. They're not Marvel style. Should I put them in drawn form or not? And the second question is, I would like to hear your horror stories of working in comics.
Horror stories of working in comics.
I don't have any.
You want to handle the first part? Or,
Yeah, sure. I think, are you saying when looking for an artist to draw your script, you mean?
The question is, if you don't draw Marvel style, if you're not top of the line, but also that's simply not your style, it never was. I was an editorial cartoonist.
Sure.
Should I draw it anyway? Is it okay if it looks like Adventure Time, or maybe even worse?
Yeah, I think this one important thing to note is that there isn't, the Marvel style has grown and changed over the years. You can grab 3 of our books and none of them will look the same. The one thing that is the same is just the quality of storytelling. And some stories demand a superhero artist who can do dynamic angles and anatomy, and one story demands a more animated style. So there's not any one style that's Marvel style beyond quality. If you're looking to show people your comic and you're not happy with your art, you can always reach out to other artists online to draw your comic. I mean, there are plenty of places like DeviantArt, Tumblr, there's schools like the Kubert School or SCAD or SVA who have hungry artists who want to draw something. And they're on the other end of the spectrum than you are. They're artists who can't write, so they need scripts in front of them. So just look online for someone to draw your stuff if you're not happy with your own art.
Yeah, and you know, a good editor it can look past bad art, especially if you put a cover letter and said, look, I drew this just to get the point across, but I'm focusing more on a writer. There's the famous, you know, Brian Bendis story where Bendis was writing and drawing his own comics, and then David Mack showed it to Joe Quesada, and Joe was really impressed. We called up Brian Bendis, and he said, I got good news and I got bad news. The good news is we want to hire you at Marvel. The bad news is not as an artist, because your art sucks. Brian gave up art, and he's been writing ever since, you know? So it's the good editors who can look past that, and, you know, you should make that clear when you're submitting, if you do submit your own work. And horror stories from comics. I don't know, comics has always been good to me. I love working at comics. There's some horror stories, just, I always say just be careful meeting your idols. Because you
Yeah.
put so many people on a pedestal. Since I was a kid, I love certain people. Then I meet them in person, and it's like they don't turn out to be as nice a person as I would have hoped them to be.
You should eat right at the cons too. I had food poisoning like 2 years ago. It's not cool at a con.
My one horror story involves a current Marvel artist. It was my first major portfolio review I got at a comic convention. I was at Dragon Con in Atlanta, and I decided I was finally going to show my work to professional artists working at Marvel. And so I walked up to Mark Bagley's table and asked him if he'd look at my work. And he said, okay. He was sitting up by himself, and I think he might have had a bad night the night before. And so he looks at my portfolio, and as he opens the first page, I go to say something. He goes, and he said, I don't need you to talk. And I said, okay. So he flipped through my portfolio, and he got to the end and closed it up, and he said, do you want me to be nice? Do you want me to be honest? And I said, I want you to be honest. And he spent 20 minutes ripping me a new one. I say that because Mark and I are really good friends now. He lives about 20 minutes from me in Atlanta, and he was absolutely right in everything he said.
Yeah.
And I, to this day, I tell the story, but I thank him for the review because if we can't take a review like that, we have no business being in comics anyway, because we're going to hear far worse online from fans. So yeah, it was a horror story at the time, but looking back now, it was a great thing.
You got one, Chris? I'm trying to think what PG one.
Not really.
Yeah, PG one.
I mean, I guess the only bad day was, I don't remember, it was like June last year. It was during Heroes Con. It was the first day of Heroes Con. And Brian Bendis, who I was working with on Uncanny X-Men, decided to post the new Dazzler design without telling me. So I'm at dinner, and I just start checking my messages, and inbox is just full of death threats. Just a flood of them on my Facebook wall, everywhere. Just Dazzler fans out of the woodwork were coming for me for blood. Whoa. And these are they were tagging me and Brian on Facebook about the stuff they wanted to do to us. And I'm like, I don't mind if you're angry about it. Like, why do you want to tag me though? Yeah, and Brian never gave me a heads up on that one. He wanted to be, here's a tease, guys, and it's like, that was not.
Dazzler fans are notoriously dangerous too. That's on you guys.
I keep getting them. Well, X-Men fans are notorious.
Yeah.
And then within that are Dazzler fans, and now I'm learning Alpha Flight fans.
Right.
So they keep giving me the really, this, you gotta be careful with them fans. And I'm like, why? Why do I keep getting them?
You got one, Robbie?
Yeah. Oh, okay, here's one. I can tell you about, well, it wouldn't be a horror story, but I can tell you, these are the best portfolio ass kicking I got. It was back in 2000, I was doing my little mini comics called Heroes Camp at the time. Me and my buddy in Texas used to go to Wizard Worlds and just show up in there, and that's where I met all Tony Moore and our little crew, that circle of creators that I know now. Well, I sent one of these books to Alex Toth, which, if you guys don't know, Alex Toth is the designer of Space Ghost, old Hanna-Barbera cartoons from the 60s. And literally, if you go find his comics, he wrote the book on storytelling.
Yeah.
He's also notoriously a grumpy old man, and will tell you, he'll tell you he's right and he's wrong in a way that's lovingly, appreciative in a way.
Right.
Like if you pee your pants in front of him, he'll tell you peed it the wrong way.
Right.
So when I sent the letter to send it to him, I didn't expect anything to get back because he didn't correspond that much anymore at that time. And then lo and behold, I got the postcard, which I still have it to this day. And he starts lovingly talks about the writing and whatnot, in which my buddy wrote it, and lovingly just put oh, I love this and that. That was 2 lines of this postcard, and it's front to back, literally, the return address to me is on the side, and you can barely read it. And he literally from there berates me from back to front, saying it's you draw fingers like they're hot dogs, and what's up with the storytelling? What is this? Why is your ink so chunky and this and that? And it was at first I was shocked, but it was oh dude, it's like being yelled by God at your first time out bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a notorious out there, I think a review he did of Steve Root.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have seen that, it's excellent. Because he really was a master storyteller, but he had no bones about telling you why you were not doing what you're supposed to do on
Yeah,
these.
right, yeah. Cool, thank you. Hey, Deadpool.
Thank you. Not really sure how this one can actually be explained, but it's more of like an artist type question. I know you said you took some people in from anime, tried to bring them over into like the comic book section for manga. Do you have any pointers or ideas that I can do for like changing your genre for someone like me that only primarily does only anime, how they could like try to transfer over to doing more comic book style drawings and comic book style animations and stuff like that? Do you have any pointers?
I don't know. It's interesting, you know. I don't differentiate between the two very much. I know that, you know, manga has specific storytelling tropes and, you know, very specific stylistic tropes, but a lot of those carry over into comics now. You know, a lot of what American comic book storytelling is a mash of all different influences from manga and from classic American comics and from European comics. So if you're a manga or animated inspired artist, you know, I would continue on that path. You know, don't change your style specifically. Try to get it work. You know, what you're doing should come naturally to you. It's just, I would look at other influences and try to incorporate a lot of those influences into your work to make it maybe, you know, because not more mainstream, but more, you know, oriented to the projects you're trying to work on. I mean, Mark, you're a good example because you were heavily influenced by manga and anime in the beginning as well.
Everyone that broke in around the time I broke in. I mean, Joe Mad and Humberto Ramos and Jessica Campbell were like gods to all of us. So everyone, we all drew like Joe Mad. And I don't draw very much like that now, but yeah, there was definitely an influence there. But I think it still exists with a lot of guys.
Yeah,
I mean,
it still does,
I still see it, you know. So I mean, I think there's a way that you don't have to like do a 180 and change what you're doing. I think that, you know, if you like what you're doing, I mean, I would just stay on that path. And
Yeah,
you just get better at it, you know.
Yeah, it's only gonna, like again, like I told the other guy, it's only gonna help your arsenal, whatever you figure out your style is at the end. Like if you look at Spider-Gwen, the background just straight out rip up of Tomo backgrounds from like Akira, so, you know, it only helps your arsenal.
All right, thank you.
And I think, you know, there's two different things that you should focus on too. It's style and storytelling. You know, manga is very, what we would say, decompressed because they're publishing mostly weekly. So they're putting out 120 pages sometimes in a month versus what we're doing in 20 pages. So just for necessity of space, comics get a little more condensed. You know, you always say, you know, if you read an American comic, say it's you know, Batman punches, panel 1, Batman punches someone, panel 2, you see him crashing through the window, panel 3, the villain hits the floor. It's a 3-panel scene, you know, and it's very simple. In manga, it would be, you know, Batman cocks his arm in one panel. Batman goes like this. You know, close up on Batman's face. You see like 5 panels of the punch connecting, and then the guy flies across the room in 5 more panels, and the window breaks and shatters over 6 pages, and then you see him fall, and it's kind of the storytelling and the rhythm is extremely different. So understand what the manga storytelling is, anime storytelling is, and translating that to make it a little bit more easier to digest is also important.
Yeah. So kind of like hip hop, really. No matter what stylistics, whether it be manga, French comics, or American comics, you're sampling to make your own style. So it's just best to like just do that way.
Incorporate everything.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing, the word you kept saying was storytelling, which I think a lot of artists forget about. They're focused so heavily on how do I draw? What's my style? Where do I fit in? Without thinking, okay, how well is my storytelling ability? Which I think you need to focus on just as much as you focus on your drawing ability, because it's 50% of the job. You know?
All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, man. Hey, what's up?
Good afternoon, guys.
Hi.
I actually have 2 questions. The first one is to piggyback off the first question as a writer. When you're going to the bathroom material and you have a piece of work, does the artistry take away from the writing, whereas the writing can be great, but you're turned off by not reading the piece because of the visuals aren't up to par with the writing? And my second question is, can you give us an example of where you had to explain to like an editor, from an editor to a writer for the comic book, like, okay, if you change this, it'll come out better. Like, for example, say, if you're editing a Wolverine comic, like, you should take apart this story, or we're gonna lose this panel to make the story progress forward more.
I got caught up in the bathroom part of what you said. For the first part, I don't think an editor has a hard time telling the difference between great art and a bad story. And so, if an awful writer wrote something that Travis Charest drew, I think an editor would be able to tell Travis's art is beautiful, but this writer doesn't know what he's doing. So that I think a good editor can tell their way through that. If that answers your first question.
Well, actually, the other way around.
And the other way,
But it's sucky art.
sure, 100%. I think because everyone has different tastes and opinions on what they like the most in terms of art styles. If you gave the same script to 3 different artists of varying styles or quality, you could still tell if the script was good. And it doesn't matter if the art's terrible. Especially like CB said before, if you're submitting it to an editor or someone to take a look at, if you preface it by saying that, I didn't have a lot of money to pay this guy, he kind of rushed it out, he did it on the weekends or whatever, I think that makes it clear too. The other question was about giving a note to
Well,
a creator?
just in a situation where you guys talk about with the conflict between the editor and the artist.
I don't know, it's a long process, because for the most part in series, you get an overview and you knock out those problems up front, and then when you get to the scripting stage, you knock out some problems there. When you get the art in, you knock out some dialogue problems there, so it's all different steps of the process, get different kinds of tips.
I think some common notes that I remember, giving or receiving is,
Yeah.
Don't get too crazy with your storytelling. Stick to the grid. You might want to go on do crazy 90s image style kind of stuff with crazy panel borders and have people jumping from, breaking the gutters and stuff. But sometimes the note I commonly give is, stick to the grid. Keep it simple. Have fun within the panel without getting too crazy with your layouts. And don't over-sexualize is extremely important. You get a lot of new artists, especially who want to come in and they want to draw marble female characters. They tend to make them a little bustier or go for the shot where it's always showing them something sexy. And it's just remember that the readership is male and female, so you have to be taking into account people and draw our characters like real characters. The Marvel characters are first and foremost. Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Carol Danvers is Captain Marvel, so you have to make them look human and treat them like human, they're not just playthings or toys out there.
Right. Props on the page, yeah.
And with Wolverine, the comment I would always give, and I still do it, is don't crop the claws. It always bothers me when you got these great Wolverine panels and he's doing all this stuff, and they just don't like to draw the tips of his claws for some reason, especially on covers when I see them like this and then they're cropped in different places. I'm like, wait, why are you cutting off Wolverine's claws? It's like not showing Batman's cowl or not showing his insignia. You remember what the distinguishing features of the characters are and accentuate those characters to make it look cool.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, man. Hey, what's up?
Hey, I'm just here to ask some questions. My question is about I guess sort of finding collaborators. I guess part of, I'd like to know where you think would be a good opportunity or venue to try and find maybe an artist who's willing to collaborate and/or a writer who's willing to collaborate with an artist, maybe somebody who's realizing that maybe knows where their strength is and sort of wants to find somebody to collaborate with. Would it be, I think you guys touched upon it briefly there, but would it be like things like art universities, or where exactly would be some venues for sort of these, to try and find collaborators for your work, I guess?
CB said it before, like this whole room.
Yeah, who wants to work with this guy? Anybody?
It's full of people who are looking for stuff to draw and write.
Cons are a great place. You've made the first step coming here. In Artist Alley, there's not just professional. There's up-and-coming artists, writers, and artists who are out there to look for specifically here to look for other collaborators. Two online resources are enormous. Penciljack.com and digitalwebbing.com have specific forums that are artists looking for writers and writers looking for artists. And the Mark Miller, Miller World, MILLAR WORLD. I think it's .biz or .tv or something.
.tv, yeah.
Mark has specific forums there too, where he's always promoting writers who are looking for artists and artists who are looking for writers. So online resources are very big.
DeviantArt too. DeviantArt has thousands and upon thousands of artists, and a lot of them just looking for work. I think that beyond all that, what you want to probably also do to separate yourself from some of the other people who are, because are you a writer or an artist? Are you?
I'm hoping to be a writer.
Okay.
I think everybody, I don't know, I think the majority of the people who raise their hands look like that's the case too. So.
Right. No, that's all good. I think what's really important to separate yourself from a lot of other people is if you can pay something, honestly, because a lot of guys are looking for artists to work for free, and what you're going to end up doing is probably finding an artist of lesser quality than you'd probably want. And because you're trying to get them to work for free for maybe 50% of the ownership of the property or back end or whatever, you're going to have a really hard time with them completing the project. They'll end up
Yeah.
flaking out after the first 5 pages or so.
But I guess maybe my question is, like, is there like any kind of rate for this? Because it just seems like, I mean, I don't know if there would be something like, am I looking to pay like $50, $5,000?
Not even that.
Not even that.
I mean,
honestly, the difference between $0 and $10 a page, your talent pool, the difference is enormous.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, trust me, it's not that much. I used to work for Oni, and I got paid $25 a page. It's nothing.
My first was $10 a page.
How you doing, guys? Thank
Hey.
you for having this panel. I have 2 quick questions. The first one, you guys touched on it before. How do you know when you're ready to quit your day job? And the second question is, how do you, especially as far as artists, how do you handle deadlines?
Well, as far as deadline goes, answer that one. It's a balance. It's a workaround. I mean, I'm very, you gotta have really goals. Like my big goal is like, on top of like making the book really, really good looking, I also like to pay my rent. So I like to get that on time. But it's, sometimes, you know, life happens, dude. I mean, that's when you gotta have like a really good relationship with like your editor, and because there's a situation with Spider-Gwen too, we had to push the deadline a little bit back because my computer just crashed and ate like 7 pages out of redo. And typically they're like, oh, can you turn that around again? Nick Lowe was nice enough, like, all right, dude, we'll give you 7 more days, extend it to fix it and make sure it looks right for that book. So, you know, life happens, but like anything, you have to have that initiative just to be in comics. You should already know to have that initiative to hit your deadlines, because one thing comes, you got to be a pro about it. It's still, as much as a fun job it is, it's still a job. And there are a lot of people who rely on, especially an artist, there are a lot of people who rely on you. It's like, if I'm late, that means Rico's late. And then that puts more stress on the editors because, and Calvin for lettering, because that spoke just fell off the train and just like completely went awry. So you gotta hit your deadlines and be a pro about that to hit it.
I think when it comes to when to quit your day job, there's no easy answer, to be honest with you. It's a very personal thing. You know, I think what Robbie just said, paying your rent is important. That's what people forget. Comics is fun, but art is business in this case. And you've got to, you know, you're the only person who's going to know your own personal finances, how much you need a month to spend on rent, how much you need for food, how much you need to feed your family, how much you're going to spend on comic books at the store every Wednesday, you know. So it's when you can balance that out and feel comfortable where you can support yourself without that day job. And health insurance also, you know, is a big factor. You know, it's a very personal decision. Do you know what made you finally figure out you were going to leave your day job?
Well, I mean, it's a dialogue. It came down to Marvel giving me an offer that was kind of hard to turn down. But even then, I'd been working with them for 2 years at that point, and I've been working with sort of the same editors, so they sort of knew what was going on with me. They knew I was juggling 2 jobs, and it sort of came down to, we're ready to hire you full time if you're ready to match us. So it's sort of the trust between you and whoever you're working with that this isn't just something fleeting, and that you're both on the same page about the fact that this can't be something fleeting. I mean, the best thing you can do in comics is, especially with an editor, is being honest with them. The more they know, the more they can help you. You know, you going dark and dodging deadlines is not good because you want to finish, and that's fine. But that's not good for them because they have literally no idea what you're doing. They can take a guess, but if you tell them, you know, 2 days ahead of time, like, hey, you know, hey, I'm going to be a few days late, then they can prepare. And so the more open you are with the people you're working with and finding an editor you like, and that is a process. But when you get it to gel, you want to make it work. And so once you get to that point where you really are comfortable with them, the doors will open between the relationship. And then you'll know when you're ready. Working 2 jobs and getting 3 hours of sleep for a year kind of also helps to make this.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I was working a corporate job, you know, a tie every day, and I just realized after I started doing some indie work for about 2 years, I was starting to get some more mainstream stuff, that I was working a regular, you know, 40, 50 hours a week at a regular job, and then coming home and drawing till like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I was just exhausted all the time. my wife and I had just bought our first house, so I went to her and just said, if I'm going to do this, I need to dedicate all my time to this. And I can't believe she actually did it, but she gave me 2 years. She goes, you can quit your job and I'll give you 2 years to make a living. If you're not making as much money you made in the corporate job, at the end of 2 years, you got to put your tie back on and go back to work. And so I worked 2 years scared to death that I was going to have to go back to this office job. So working scared is a great way to do it. But as far as deadlines go, you're talking about meeting deadlines. I think it's really important. It's something I wish I had done that I wasn't doing until, of course, that 2 years came up. Is I never worked as if, like if I sat down to do a page, I was just drawing a page and just trying to make it look as good as possible. What I wasn't doing was going, okay, if I work for Marvel, I have 8 hours to do this page. How well can I make this look in 8 hours? Not how well can I make this look in the 5 days I take to do this page. So if you're a writer or an artist who wants to break into Marvel or DC or any other place, work as if, and that way when it does happen, you're already ready.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, man. We're going to cap the line now to the girl with the glasses.
Thank you, you guys, for being here. I am a artist who's inspiring to, want to be a game designer as well as work on things like manga and comics. So I was wondering, how do you really break into the industry? Kind of looking for the right people who are interested in your comics or interested in your manga, and also people who are interested in the things you do, like you finding editors or such. Basically, how do you break into the industry? How do you, take the first steps into getting into the industry and getting hired?
It's just about putting your work out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like marketing is a big part. Like you got to learn to like market yourself online because you got to, it's literally like you see an artist alley, you see all those banners out there. That's a big like billboard for each individual artist right there. So online, you got to make your own digital billboard out there. Like put yourself out. Like for example, like when Instagram first started long ago, I started doing the desk shot stuff on my Instagram, and like they'll start getting attention from there. Like that's a huge billboard. And on top of me just doing it on, Twitter, having my own website and DeviantArt and whatnot. You just got to constantly just wave that flag, like, hey, look at me, like I got some rad crap going on over here. Can you just check it out, type thing.
Does it work even if you don't have an audience yet?
Oh yeah, of course. I had no audience at all.
You have to build that audience yourself.
Think about it. None of us had an audience, technically speaking, until we did have an audience. And it was just like going online and creating a brand for yourself.
Doing it, yeah.
So self-advertisement is one of the keys, I guess?
Yeah, it's like I said, all of us, we pretty much like, it's safe to say like we all like, as far as like audience reception, like we started at ground zero, dude. And a lot of us was just, as part of putting the legwork on top of doing the work is learning to market your book and learning how to sell the book. Because that also helps for Marvel because, with Spider-Gwen, me and Jason and Rico didn't spend like 10 years doing indie books and just, hand selling it and like, going online and marketing. I don't think it would be as big phenomenon if it wasn't for us pushing it, because when Ed Spiders came out, we're pushing it to the moon. I got the band situation involved in that, the Face the Monster, Face the Tiger song and whatnot. Then, that was part of that whole like ground roots marketing, just to like wave that flag, say, oh, we're gonna do something cool over here type thing. So, and like I said, you doing it on your own, it's gonna show, Marvel that, hey, I can market this book too on my own, because they're gonna put you on the press circles and whatnot, and you're gonna have to sell this book on top of that too.
You're your own best salesman.
Yeah.
Because Marvel has a sales and marketing department, but they're selling 100 different books a month, 25 different books a week, so their focus is split. Your job as a creator is focused solely on pushing your work, your book, and your reputation.
And Marvel does appreciate if they go online and see that you have 15,000 followers on Facebook and 30,000 followers on Instagram, because when you put that cover up, Marvel's going to do their best to sell some books, but if you can move a few hundred more, they're very appreciative of that kind of stuff. So, starting that online branding is a very important thing.
And then as far as finding an editor, how do I go about finding editors for like things like the manga or comics?
Manga has editors too, so read what manga you like, figure out who those editors are, and then start a line of dialogue with them through communication, through Twitter or through not so much Facebook because that's to be more personal, but find out who those editors are. The address of every comic book company, every manga company is in the first page of the indicia. Just send some letters.
Are there any websites or anything in particular, any resources I could use to find people like that?
Twitter. Twitter is a very big resource for finding people.
Yeah, look at their name in the book, and then look them up online. A lot of times you can find them by searching their name in Twitter, too.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Lightning round. Hey.
So I'm a writer. I've done all kinds of writing. I just really recently started doing comic writing. But professionally, I've done a lot of editing. I've worked on books. I've worked on websites. And I really want to transition into editing for comics. And I'm just wondering, like, what would be a good way to transition the editing that I've already done? Because I feel like when I'm sending out resumes, like I don't have a comic book where I can point to and say, like, I edited this, but I have websites I've done editing for, books, and is that seen as relevant?
Yeah, most comic book editors coming into Marvel, they haven't edited a comic book before either. They just have experience in other mediums. So it's really, you know, writing a cover letter, making it very clear what your passion is, and you think you could transition that experience you have in other mediums into comic books with, you know, concrete examples. Maybe test, you know, on this website, my job was daily to hit deadlines, you know, to put up different articles, put up this much context. I think that would translate good into hitting, you know, monthly comic book deadlines. You know, on doing this, I had to tell a story, you know, and this, I think that would make me understanding and capable of working well with other writers. It's just telling your story through the cover letter and through your resume. And, you know, to make that transition, all of Marvel editorial jobs are posted on DisneyJobs.com. So a lot of stuff comes up pretty regularly, so that's a place to check.
Okay, great. Yeah, and it sounds like just get really specific about it.
Very, very specific, yep.
Thanks. Last question.
I'm wondering how did you or do you deal with it when you don't have a deadline to work with, when you're just working for yourself, and how you deal with your professional responsibilities and what you want to make happen on your own time?
There's this game called Destiny, which is awesome.
You have it too?
I love Destiny.
What system?
Xbox. I draw for myself when I have a chance, but that's very little time, and I have children. I don't know if you don't think you guys have kids. I have a child too, which sucks away any free time I would have when I'm not working on deadlines or something. And then Destiny.
Just discipline. It has to become more important to you to finish when you say you're going to finish than making the thing you're going to do as best as it can be. If you train yourself to, like, because I said so, I'm going to do it, that is a far more substantial skill than drawing one pretty picture. You become reliable, and then people who work with you like that more. You know, it's better for you to be nice and on time than it is for you to be good at what you do.
Yeah, be your own boss. That's really what it comes down to. And some people have that skill to be able to sit down and discipline themselves to get it done. I can't tell you how many people I've met over the years, you know, come up to me, hey man, I'm still working on those comic pages, I'll get them to you soon. And then a year goes by and it's like, hey man, I had some stuff happen to me and, you know, I went through all this stuff, but I'm working on those comic book pages and it's been 5 or 6 years sometimes. And it's like, no, sometimes you just have to buckle down and say, you know what, I'm gonna get it done. You know, take that week or take that hour every day, you know, don't go on vacation, work and get it done. But you have to be just as strict with yourself as your actual boss at your day job is with you.
Cool, thank you so much. Before we leave, I wanted to say any of the artists in the crowd who have your portfolios here, you can stop by the Marvel booth today through Saturday, drop off your portfolio, ask someone there for some help. We schedule them for the next day, and we can see you throughout the weekend if you have any questions. But I want to say thanks to everybody on the panel. Thanks to you guys for showing up today.
Thanks for coming.